here. The plat of the village of Centerville, now Carrollton, is laid out by Peter Bohart in 1815. The showroom of the Carrollton Motor Car Company showing the 1924 Chevrolets. And the flotilla of 7 cars of the Carrollton Motor Car Company ready for the 1915 Centennial Parade. The Christmas time showroom, 1924. The Carrollton Milling Company float for the 1915 parade. The Carrollton Motor Car Company about 1918 to 1920. And the same building shown from a different view, and on the right, the present location of the Carroll Journal, the 1927 Chevrolet on display. And the slogan on the window says, Tunney, Lindbergh, and Chevrolet First and 27, and Gene Miller, and the Ideal Rifle Club, which included George W. Puss McConnell, Dr. R.A. Dunlap, Dr. J.R. Williams, P.O. McCulley, Kilt Abrams, Thomas M. Hemming, Homer J. Richards, Fred W. McCoy, and others. And the high school band on the school steps with George Marshall, Gardner, Harold Vassbinder, Joe Duell, Willard Swan, and H.R. Swan in the front row, Fred Bell, Harvey Gutschall. The high school baseball team about 1910, including Sam Hall, Roy Vassbinder, Doc Helfrich, John Lawler, Ollie McConnell, and others. The drawing of the first railroad car coming into Carrollton, horse-drawn and on wooden rails. This film was brought to you through the efforts and courtesy of Henry Thornhill Myers and Horace A. Budd and Jacqueline Wales. Myers' Tin Shop, former tin shop on North Lisbon Street in Carrollton, Ohio. And your narrator, Tom Richards. J.H. McElroy in front of his drugstore about 1905, the year of the creation of the Rexall drugs chain. And from a display of black and white cigars in his front window, suggested the selection of black and white as the high school colors in 1907. The Carrollton Motor Car Company after the remodeling in about 1924, showing part of the Carroll Journal building on the right. And the tire float of the L&M Rubber Company ready for the 1915 parade. And the drug sundry float of the L&M Rubber Company for the 1915 parade with John Schultz Drayman at the reins. And the drug sundry department with Howard Pretty among those shown on the right. And the tire-making department, treading department, with Leonard Fenton, foreman in the center, and Robert Camel and Roddy McDonald among those on the left. And another department in the tire division, with Bob Camel and Roddy McDonald on the left and Claire Fitzgerald on the right, and back to the drug sundry department with Howard Pretty on the right. And with J.O. Metler in the foreground and Howard Pretty in the rear. Charles Carroll of Carrollton, Maryland, the last surviving signer of the Declaration of Independence, for whom this county was named in 1832. And Peter Bohart, who platted and laid out the town in 1815. And back to Charles Carroll, for whom and who was informed shortly before his death of the county being named in his honor. And Isaac Atkinson, the member of the legislature who was given credit for the legislation creating the county. And Daniel McCook and his wife Martha. And their former home at the head of the square, which for many years was occupied by the George J. Butler store. And the safety door, which was invented, manufactured, and sold by Charles Huffman. And the Coleman Band of 1860 to 1868. Coleman Bugle Band. Now we come to the movie which was made by the Star Theater, Charles Huffman, and his daughter Lena. The picture being taken in the then side yard of Edward L. Swan on West Main Street in Carrollton, Ohio, which is now the parking lot immediately west of the Walter T. Flanagan Insurance Office. Lena Huffman is the daughter of Charles Huffman, the operator of the then Star Theater, which is located in the building just recently vacated by the Free Press Standard. Here's a still of the children in the side yard at that time. And in the white shop cap is John L. Richards, and in the rocking chair is Charles Shattuck, and in front of her is her cousin Lena Huffman, and seated on the left is Tom Richards. Behind him is Mary Richards, and behind the girl in the rocking chairs and behind Harriet is Joseph E. Richards. The other boy in the background is Arthur Summers, and across the street is the former residence of Dr. J.R. Williams. And there's Mary Shattuck in the chair, and holding the parasol is her cousin Lena Hoffman. Here's the Star Theater, which was then, and the owner Henry Hoffman and his son Charlie Hoffman, the operator, and in the shirt sleeves is Charles Shattuck, the projection operator, and their daughter Lena Hoffman in the foreground. Carrollton Village and the county officials on the courthouse steps. And they included Frank Dunlap, Judge Junius C. Farrell, Dr. E.H. Heiss, the mayor, Edward F. Lawler, the village clerk, Robert W. Patterson, the county treasurer, William M. Moffett, probate judge, Virgil Stockton, the county recorder, George Galbraith, the sheriff, Virgil Studi, the auditor, Fred W. McCoy, the prosecuting attorney, Richard H. Lee, the county engineer, D.O. Rattan, Philip Roddy Bush, a county commissioner, Donald W. Blythe, a young engineer assisting in the engineer's office at that time, and others. And here you'll find the Centennial Reception Committee for Governor Willis in the center, and on his left is J. Marshall Westfall, and behind him you'll see E.L. Henderson and Philip Roddy Bush and Virgil Studi, and in the third row Paul H. Kemmer and Thomas J. Salzman, and others on the reception committee. Then they go to the Butler Field on 3rd Street Northeast, and you find practice before the baseball game between Carrollton and Sleenville, with Governor Willis pitching and Judge Eckley batting. And the high school alumni parade with the Pitchers Ladies Band from East Liverpool, the parade forming at the then new high school building, which at that time housed the high school, the junior high, the grade schools, kindergarten, normal school, and the entire. Here comes the parade proceeding west on East Main Street, the Pitchers Ladies Band, with William M. Punk Coleman, drum major of Carrollton, leading the band in the first car of the parade, driven by Dr. J.R. Williams and his brother, Colonel Robert C. Williams, of the high school class of 1880, and West Point of 1887. In the back seat, members of the class of 1879, including Mrs. Margaret Blythe, and there you'll see Creepool and Netta Eversole of the class of 1880. Now they're proceeding west on East Main Street. The alumni arranged by classes with their years designated on the umbrellas. I see there's a class of 1906. In the white suit is Joseph E. Lawler, Jr., Donald Roof, Florence McLaughlin, Nehemiah Heldrick, the high school band, including Roy Vassbiner in the middle of the street with the clarinet, Harold Vassbiner on the bass drum. There's a still of the Pitchers Ladies Band. more stills of the alumni portion of the parade. These scenes on East Main Street were made before the construction of the Dennis building, which later became the present Eagles building. There is standing on the left, and not very clearly, the Croxton Garage building, and the dark sign extending out into over the sidewalk is the J.U. 5 and 10 cent store. J.U. Heiniger was the father of J. Lee Heiniger, who then operated the 5 and 10 cent store on West Main Street in the storeroom presently occupied by the C&K shoe store. Charlie Fultz, the proprietor. Here we come with the motor vehicle portion, and there's the parade the day Governor Willis was here. Governor Willis in the back seat. Now we go to the ball field and showing the teams and the Carrollton team. Those shown include Ray Swan, Chris McConnell, John M. Lawler, David Hemming, Brian Gordon, Miller Chalice, Jack Fischel, Leonard Fenton, Petey Gantz, Cliff Hess, Olin Masters, Harry Coleman, and Carl Gass. The Salineville players included Frank Schubert, Moxie Schubert, Joe McNichol, Taylor Lang, Roy Beckwith, Merv Marshall, Eddie Ridgely, and Bill Allison. Here we find the industrial parade with Governor Willis, and here comes the Carrollton band led by William M. Punk Coleman. The musicians include Cliff Hess, Charlie McLaughlin, Walter Dre, Park Beatty, Wade Beatty. There's E.L. Henderson leading the Carrollton Pottery division of the parade, and Carl Henderson in the baby buggy being hauled by the secretaries in the pottery office, including Lena McFarland and Iona Albaugh. Here comes a float. There's the Carrollton Millinery float. Mike Lanahan in the walkover shoe float, John Arbaugh in his float with Lawrence Barber driving, the Croxton Garage float. Here come the men from the Albright China Company with the car from the Carrollton Milling Company in the middle. There's a float with the large pitcher in the middle of the street. 17 cars in Carrollton at the time, and they were all in the parade. Carrollton Milling Company float, Carrollton band again, with Heiniger's 5 and 10 cent store sign shows up clear here. The men in the white shop caps are the tire builders from the L&M Rubber Company. There's the Drug Sundry float. There's the Moody's Coal Yard float. The Prairie Schooner and the automobile are both from Tote and Beamer, representing 100 years of transportation progress. The pony buggy is V.J. Hopkins' float, Daniel J. Van Pelt driving with his cousin Ethel Sweeney, riding shotgun. There's the Carrollton Millinery float, a still of it with Mrs. Eckley and Mrs. Carl Blosner, Mike Lanahan and his walkover shoe float, John Arbaugh and Lawrence Barber with their float. There's a still of the Albright China Company employees. man at the scar is Henry P. Cole, Sr. The still of the Carrollton Band. The end of the parade is at there goes Milo Ray and his new wife walking towards the square to see the parade as it turns north on Lisbon Street to head for the fairground. And here in front of the Star Theater we find Arthur Mercer and Stotts Fonda Jr. doing an impersonation of Charlie Chaplin. Now we find the Beards of 1965, Brothers of the Brush, ready for the Sesquicentennial of 1965. First we find Harold B. McElroy, Walter Doyle Farrell, Kenneth A. Witter, William E. Peterson, Emerson Eugene Serby. An aerial view of Carrollton. Another aerial view of Carrollton. Percy McFadden. Ronald P. Davis. Gene Gavorsic. Donald C. Fox, the Monroe Township clerk and photographer, and Henry P. Cole Jr., Joseph A. Johnson. William C. Bass. Lynn Fox, Joseph Huddleston Blazer, and Harry E. Dyke. Byron R. Shotwell. And Russell Cole. The best-looking man of the class of 1930, John K. Saltzman, Lauren F. Miller, Jr., Vernon Broombaugh, and George E. M. Bud Smith, Richard Taylor Saltzman, Henry Thornhill Myers. Henry Thornhill Myers, John D. Poplin, Henry Harrison Hoover, Walter T. Funnican Mary, Roy Burrier, Kenneth A. Witter again, Robert Ferguson, Richard C. Hardgrove, Chairman of the Sesquicentennial Committee. And Serby again. And David Lumley. This film has been produced through the efforts of Henry Thornhill Myers and Horace A. Wales and his wife Jacqueline Wales of the McElroy's Drug Store and the operators and owners of the Virginia Theater. Tom Richards.